Hello, that's Jack here, bringing your weekly bread making tip at bakewithjack.co.uk every single Thursday. And today I want to talk to you about steam. I was sent a question from Dan on Facebook, thank you very much Dan, about what steam does and why we use steam in the oven when we're baking. And let me tell you why, and then I'll tell you the best way I find of making it happen. So let me tell you what happens when your bread bakes. If you've got a loaf and you pop it into the oven in the heat, it's going to puff up a little touch like this, right? That's called oven spring. Okay, when it puffs up like that in the heat, that's called oven spring. Then what happens is that the outside of the dough sets, like the crust forms on the outside, and the oven spring stops at that point, and then it continues to bake. Now, when you put steam into the oven, it creates a humid environment so that when that loaf goes in, it's able then to expand for longer, since the steam delays that crust from forming. So it can continue to expand a little bit more, becoming bigger and more lighter and more aerated. Another thing is that really crusty crust that you're trying to produce out of your oven at home is achievable by steam. That's the only way. Every single bread comes out of the oven crusty. That's the rules. It just comes out crusty, every single one, with or without steam. However, as you let it rest on the cooling rack, let it cool down, all that humidity evens out inside, and the crust often softens up again and becomes chewy again, and you lose that crispy crunchiness. Now, with the steam, that makes a crust that stays. And here's what happens in my mind. What happens is, in that humid environment, you are able to bake your loaf on a higher heat for longer, because that steam will stop it from burning, and that high heat on the outside of the dough, on the outside of the bread, will create a real nice crusty crust that won't go away. In the past, I've done a massive loaf in my oven for like a dough that I've come back from a demonstration with loads of dough left. I'll just make up a big loaf, stick on the top shelf, loads and loads of steam, and I've quite happily baked it at maximum temperature in my oven, which is about 230 degrees, for 40-45 minutes without it burning, and that's thanks to the steam. Wicked crust. There's another thing that I read the other day in this book, Slow Dough Real Bread, got sent to me the other day. I'm really pleased with it, and it says this: steam turns the outer surface of the dough into a flexible gel, which allows it to expand more easily in the oven than if a dry crust starts forming straight away. Fine. Later in the dry heat stage of baking, the gel sets to form a shiny and in some cases crackly crust. So if you're in a baker's and you see a real nice shine on the top of a loaf, real crackly thick crust, that's thanks to the steam, because that steam condenses on the outside, creating that nice flexible gel in that book, what that book says, and that bakes on the top, making it nice and crusty, which does make sense in my mind. So there's a few ways of getting steam into your oven, and I want to I'm just going to tell you about my most successful way of doing it. Everyone's oven's different, and every time I go to somebody's house, the oven's completely different. Sometimes they've got a vent coming out the back allowing the steam to escape. Sometimes there's a vent in the front allowing the steam to escape. Sometimes it keeps the steam in really well. And in a household oven, you know, it's probably designed in a way to stop that steam from hitting you in the face when you open the door, and that's probably why it ejects the steam from somewhere, I'd imagine. But it's a bit tricky to get the same results in everyone's oven, but there are ways to do it, okay? What I do is this: I have the top shelf, in fact I have the top shelf about in the middle way down of the oven. Then on the bottom of the oven, on the very floor of the oven, I put a deep roasting tray. The roasting tray stays in the oven all the time, it just lives there. Every time I preheat the oven, the tray's preheating itself, and when my dough's ready to go, I pop the kettle on, a kettle of water, fill it up halfway, whatever, click it on. Dough's ready to go. Wait for it to click off, boiled water, put the dough into the oven, take your jug to the oven, pull out your deep tray on the bottom shelf with some oven gloves, pour the water in about 1 centimetre, 2 centimetres, all steam up everywhere, shut the door, close it in there, contain the steam inside the oven, and that should be enough to get a real nice crispy crust. Sometimes if I've got space, if I'm just using that one shelf for baking bread, I've got another shelf underneath it and a tray underneath that shelf on the floor of the oven. If I'm just using the top shelf for baking bread like a big loaf, double up those 2 trays. Get another tray in there, the same, 2 roasting trays underneath your shelf where you're baking on, and double up that steam. Really create loads and loads of steam, because you can't do too much, I don't think. Create loads of steam and then get a real crusty crust, and that's when I baked that loaf that time, 45 minutes on 230 without it burning. Real nice crispy crust. And if you properly nail it, loaf comes out of the oven, get onto your cooling rack, turn your telly off, turn your radio off, make it nice and quiet, and sit and listen to your loaf singing, because it will crack and it will snap, crackle and pop while it's sitting and resting and cooling on your cooling rack. And that's when you know that you've nailed that proper crust. And then sit back and enjoy your bread. Let it cool down first, of course, and then eat it all up. That's what I do. So if you struggle with that, if it still doesn't make a nice crust, there's another thing you can do. Allow your loaf to cool down. Allow it to cool down completely. Put the oven back on 200 degrees. Get your squirty gun. I talked about squirty gun before, I think. Like a mister with water in it. Take your loaf, spray it all over nice and wet, pop it back in the oven for 12-15 minutes, and that should create a crispy crust that does not go away. I hope this has helped you make bread. I hope this has helped you create that nice crispy crust that everybody's after in your own oven at home. Good luck with it. Let me know if you have success with it. Please let me know. If you like this, please click like. And if you don't want to miss a single one of my videos, click the subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. It's much appreciated that you come and hang out with me every single week on here, listening to me talk about bread and baking, because I love it. And I look forward to seeing you next week. If you've got a question, send it on to me. I look forward to answering it soon. Take care. See ya.